In 1972, Henry Kissinger sat across from a Chinese official and said with complete confidence that trade between the US and China would always be negligible. Fast forward 35 years. Walmart alone was importing $18 billion worth of Chinese goods every single year. That one miscalculation tells you everything about how America misread China. And today, after trade wars, chip bans, and sanctions, China is stronger than it has ever been. So how did this happen? And can America actually stop China now? Let's get into it. In December 2024, the Trump administration released the 2025 U.S. National Security Strategy. The document does something unusual right at the start. It blames America itself. It argues that for 3 decades, Washington believed that welcoming China into global trade, opening American markets, and encouraging U.S. investment in China would eventually turn China into a Western-friendly democracy. The theory: make China rich, and China will become like us. It didn't work. What actually happened is that China got enormously rich and then used that wealth entirely for its own ambitions. The document admits, almost with regret, that the relationship that started in the late 1970s between a wealthy America and one of the poorest countries on Earth has transformed into a rivalry between near equals. And that's what's driving the panic in Washington. To understand how we got here, we go back to July 8th, 1971. Kissinger lands in Pakistan officially for a diplomatic visit. He meets with the Pakistani president, and then he vanishes. For 64 hours, nobody knows where he is. The Pakistani government says he's sick at a mountain resort. That was a cover story. What really happened? Kissinger was driven to an airport, boarded a secret Pakistani Airlines flight, and flew to Beijing on a mission that even the U.S. State Department didn't know about. His goal: convince China to invite Nixon for a visit. America desperately wanted this meeting, believing that pulling China away from the Soviet Union would give the U.S. a massive strategic advantage in the Cold War. The Chinese? Far less eager. Premier Zhou Enlai reportedly compared Nixon to someone showing up uninvited at the door. But they agreed on one condition. The invitation had to make clear that Nixon was the one who wanted to come, not that China was inviting him. In February 1972, Nixon flew to Beijing. He met Mao. He spent a week trying to win China over on Vietnam, Taiwan, Korea. He got very little of what he wanted diplomatically, but he gave China something far more valuable in return: legitimacy and access to the world. Nixon's visit encouraged America's allies to engage with China. It opened trade routes. It signaled that China was open for business. Nixon thought he was making a brilliant strategic move. He was actually planting the seeds of China's future dominance. After Mao's death in 1976, Deng Xiaoping took power and launched China's reform and opening up policy in 1978. America was thrilled. They thought China was finally moving in their direction. They were wrong about what direction that actually was. Deng was playing a completely different game. Before leaving power, he left his successors a strategic doctrine, 7 words that would guide China for 3 decades. Hide your strength. Bide your time. Stay out of the spotlight. Don't challenge America. Don't make noise. Just build. And build they did through Reagan, through Bush, through Clinton, who delivered China's WTO membership in 2001. America kept integrating China into the global economy, convinced this would liberalize it. It didn't liberalize China. It industrialized it. And meanwhile, the U.S. was celebrating its Cold War victory over the Soviet Union, completely distracted, completely overconfident. The Chinese were watching, and quietly becoming the most powerful manufacturing and technological force the world had ever seen. This strategy held for nearly 30 years, right up until Xi Jinping looked at the board and decided, the moment has arrived. When Xi took power in 2013, he threw out Deng's playbook. No more hiding, no more low profile. In 2017, he told the world directly, China has stood up. China has grown rich. China has grown strong. It is moving towards center stage. Washington finally paid attention and panicked. The 2017 U.S. national security strategy labeled China a strategic competitor for the first time. The gloves were off. Trump launched a trade war in 2018. Tariffs, sanctions, attacks on Huawei. It all backfired. The tariffs mostly hurt American consumers through higher prices. And by cutting China off from American supply chains, the trade war forced China to build its own, making it more self-reliant, not weaker. Trump, without intending to, made China stronger. Biden tried a different angle. Cut China off from advanced semiconductor chips. No chips, no AI. No AI, no military modernization. Same result. The restrictions pushed China to pour billions into domestic chip development, and in August 2023, Huawei released a smartphone with a 7-nanometer processor, a chip America said China couldn't make. Then, in January 2025, a Chinese hedge fund released an AI model called DeepSeek, performing at the level of the best American AI, at a fraction of the cost, built on chips that were supposed to be too weak for the job. Every sanction, every trade war, every ban, all of it accelerated China's independence. Here's the thing people miss. China is not the Soviet Union. The USSR was a military giant with a collapsing economy. It couldn't compete with America technologically or financially. The Cold War was always an uneven fight. China is something completely different. In 2022, China accounted for 27% of all global scientific publications in science and engineering, the US 14%. China graduates 3.6 million STEM students per year. America, 820,000. Nearly 6 million Chinese students studied at Western universities over the past 2 decades and came home with that knowledge. And by purchasing power parity, the most accurate measure of real economic output, the IMF estimates China's economy at $33 trillion versus America's $27 trillion. China is already the world's largest economy by that measure. This isn't a rising power anymore. This is a risen power. So here's where we land. The 2025 National Security Strategy admits the problem. It blames past administrations. It identifies China as the defining challenge of the century. What it doesn't do, and this is the real story, is answer the one question that matters. How do you stop a country that's already too powerful to stop? Political scientist Graham Allison calls this the Thucydides trap, named after the ancient Greek historian who documented how fear between a rising power and a declining one so often ends in war. Of 16 such rivalries over the past 500 years, 12 ended in conflict. Are we heading there? I don't know. Nobody does. But what I do know is this. Every strategy America has tried, trade wars, chip bans, sanctions, has made China more resilient, not less. And the country that Kissinger dismissed in 1972 as having nothing to export is now competing for the top position in AI, clean energy, semiconductors, electric vehicles, and military technology simultaneously. The most powerful rival America has ever faced, not because China wants war, but because China spent 50 years doing exactly what Deng told it to do. It hit its strength. It bided its time. And now, the time is up. Drop your take in the comments. Do you think we're heading toward a U.S. China war? And who wins? Subscribe for more. See you in the next one. Drop your take in the comments. Do you think we're heading toward a U.S. China war? And who wins? Subscribe for more. See you in the next one.